Hello and welcome. This is Lisa Jones, and you are listening to the Exploring Death podcast. Hello, it's Lisa Jones with the Exploring Death podcast, and today I have a wonderful guest with me. Her name is Mary D'Agostino. She lives life as a spiritual adventure, soulful journey, and heart-expanding experience. Her passionate profession is holding sacred space for her fellow travelers so they may heal, awaken, and connect with the eternal truth of their beautiful souls. Her work as a spiritual counselor, energy medicine practitioner, soul medium, and educator in the healing and intuitive arts is how she both gives and receives from the universal flow of love. She's mom to 5, one of whom is in spirit, who is now her strongest advocate and supporter. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lisa.
I'm so glad to have you on the Exploring Death podcast. We were just chatting about how we connected and how I just now allow spirit to bring whoever's next next on the podcast. And we connected, and I'm just blown away by your experience of what you've experienced in this lifetime, and especially of losing your son. And I would love you to just jump in and start sharing whatever you feel your heart wants to share at this time.
Okay, thank you. Oh yeah, the divine synchronicities that brought us together. And as I look back on my life, I'm preparing for this interview and podcast, and I'm like, wow, life really does give us everything we need, even through the challenges, and especially through the challenges. And if, I started looking at life through the synchronicities at quite a young age, I suppose. I was blessed to have that awakening experience through those who synchronistically came into my life. And, and when you follow that, when you follow the synchronicities, that was something that I started to do really strongly before my son passed. But they'll lead you, and soon your life is one opening door to another. And it's not always easy, though. It's not like synchronicities. Oh, woo, that means life's going to be wonderfully blissful. It's no, that's not it. It can be, and that's part of life. And but there's another part of life that's deeply hard. And so, as I was thinking of what I wanted to share and how I became to connected with death as an awakening, as an experience, firsthand experience with my son passing, I realized, oh, really, it was through birth, through and through birth and death, two sides to the same coin, or two.
Yes.
And I look at them as portals, and so, I became a mother at a very young age. I wasn't planning that. My life was planned to go to college and become, I didn't know quite what, a writer, a psychologist. I had a lot of ideas. An international journalist, that was one of them. And I found myself, I'm pregnant. And that was not on my radar at all. But I was 17. So I kind of kept that secret, me and my boyfriend at the time. And then we graduated from high school and decided we'll get married, have a baby, and go to college and do it that way. So I opened up to life. And that was my first really strong experience, giving birth to my daughter when I was 18, of opening to that portal. That, wow, there is something going on here, and it is miraculous and amazing and intense. And so that was birth, and it did open me up. I had a mystical experience of just feeling that pure connection to spirit. through the birth of my daughter. And I was high as a kite with no drugs, actually, at all, birth with no drugs. And that just awakened me to looking at life in a bigger, and that actually I was thinking about those things from when I was 8 years old. I remember having, where do we come from? Where do we go? What happens when we die? I'd lay in bed. I remember that. And I was very intense with those thoughts, but I would get answers, and then I would get more answers, and so the birth of my daughter, really, it felt like an answer to, why are we here? Where do we go when we die, and where do we come from? And I was raised in as a Catholic, and did went to school Catholic and religious, but I knew in my heart at a young age too, when I started asking those deep questions, I knew that God was more, the divine or source. There was more to it than when I was being told. I just knew. I knew. Mm-hmm. And I had specific experiences of going, that's not God. God's love. Wow,
God's interesting. Love. Do you want to share one of those experiences, or?
Well, just, briefly, it's interesting. You go back, and there's moments where it's like, boom, the light goes on. And then
that knowing, right?
That knowing. Mm-hmm. Yes. And it confirms, and it allows, for me, I look at it, allows your heart to open. And so I was in 4th grade, and I was in the, Sister Mary Clementine was our teacher. And she was really sweet, and I liked her a lot. And she was showing us this picture of God, and the overhead projector, we're all little kids. This was in the 1960s. And she's like, okay, this is God. And God was this man with this white hair and this lightning in the background. And he was like, thou shalt not sin. And I was like, wait a minute. And here, I remember this so clearly. I was like, wait, no, that's not God. And I thought, my teachers, the priests and the nuns, they all told me God is, this man who lives in heaven, and we have to be careful because we're bad. And I was like, that doesn't make sense. If God is love, and God loves all of his children, which they also told me. So I chose to believe that. I was like, and I just knew, and I didn't need to tell anybody. I didn't need to argue. I knew that I probably shouldn't go around saying that, like, no, that's not God. God is this God isn't that a man in heaven waiting to punish us. And I was like, no, not God. So I was so happy. I was like, yay, I know that's not God. God loves all his children, and God's not even a him. I don't know. God's something else, So anyway, years go by, and yes, I'm having all these experiences that God is God is source energy, a pure spirit, love, light. And I built my belief system on that. And it wasn't even a building of a belief system. It was an inner knowing that was being shared with me. So fast forward to my experience. I suppose I'll lay the foundation a little bit. Is over the years, I ended up having 2 marriages and 5 children. And my first, I married my high school boyfriend, and we had 2 children. And then we divorced. It was like, yeah, okay, how do we? But his mother and his father became my first, mostly his mother, teachers of human consciousness. And we did, in the 1980s, she got his mother and father, Dick and Jane. And I love sharing that. Dick and Jane, they took me in and they're like, yay, Mary, and gave me kind of the you know, the love and the acceptance that I didn't necessarily have in my family. And so opened me up to all these different experiences with meditation and experiential workshops and learning. And the first, and I had even got some Reiki, and that was in 1983. So
Wow.
if you go, so years later, I actually studied Reiki, and I'm a Reiki practitioner and a teacher now. But back then, and I knew what it was. I just knew. I was like, I know what this is. This is energy healing through our hands. Of course we have that. You know, we all
Right,
have that.
right.
So I had that opening, that wonderful support. And so over the years through my divorces, and I got divorced and got remarried about 5 years later, I was still kind of struggling between living that life of my knowing and then living the life that I was supposed to be living, which was, you know, supposed to by the society, by the family, by the religious, you know, by the culture, which was, oh, no, you're supposed to be, you know, a wife and a mother and all just very clearly defined. But I tried, you know, I tried to live that, but my heart was like, really? I don't know. So, so going through the experience of trying to live in a defined box, you know, of how I'm supposed to be, but always living kind of in secret, almost my truth of, wait, I know these things. I know life is just this mystery of love and connection and power. That's the power. That's true power. And so I started back to my studies and back to connecting with that in about in 1999. And even though I was still married and in a very conservative kind of, I was living that, oh, you're supposed to do this, you're supposed to do that. And, but I still lived my truth, you know, I just didn't do it as openly as I do now. And then there was a coming out of the closet experience, which I shared a little, which is so funny, but quickly.
Yeah. Tell us about your coming out of the closet.
Yeah. I literally came out of the closet on Oprah Winfrey show. And this is how it happened. So I read a book, and this was in 1999 by an author who was very popular at the time. Sarah Von Bronick, she wrote Simple Abundance. It was very popular. And at that time, the Oprah was, you know, had a lot of authors on, and she was having her own, you know, awakening and sharing it with millions. And so I happened to read this book, and I wrote the author a letter of thanks. And I said, thank you for writing that. It was very helpful. And it was a book called Something More. And it was about a woman living her life, not true to herself, trying to please everyone else, you know. But in this book, and it was a true story, it was a memoir from Sarah. Her husband came home one day and said, I'm not happy. I have a whole nother life, so I'm getting a divorce. And then it was Sarah's journey of her own self-exploration. So when I read that book, I was like, yes, I'm back in my own self. I believe this, and I teach this now, and I live it. It's like everything we need is inside of us. We have the beautiful treasures of wisdom and knowing and light and love. But we all have different journeys of how we access that. Mm-hmm. What wakes us up to that truth of we are whole in and of ourselves. We are inherently worthy, inherently loved, inherently good, you know, and which goes against that's the opposite of what we teach, you know, what we've been taught usually in the American culture. So that was her premise, like, oh, you have these treasures. And I was like, yay, I went. So I wrote her a letter, She sent it to the Oprah Winfrey Show. They called me. I didn't know any of this was happening. A few weeks later, and hello, this is the Oprah Winfrey Show, and it was one of her producers. I was like, no, that's not.
What a surprising phone call to get.
Right. And so it's like, no, we are, and so they did their little, they vet you and have to talk, and so we'd like you to maybe be on the show. We really we got your letter, and so I had a succession of talks with the producer over like a time period of about a week or two, and he says, well, we want to record your voice. We want to get you to read this. So this was in the 90s when there was not technology like this. So they said, we want you to send us pictures of you and your family. Okay. So you had to send it all through FedEx, so we were going back and forth. Then they're like, well, we don't know if we're going to have you on the show, but we want to film your home. And I had told them at the time that I had a walk-in closet that was just mine. My husband had his own. We had a big master bedroom suite. We had one area that I used for my meditation and sitting there and doing my morning. But when I wasn't sitting there, I had to remove everything. And I put it all in my closet. So my closet had all these candles, and kind of like my house does now, right? Exactly. Altars, my altar, my quotes, inspirational quotes, all these things were in my closet. And so the Oprah show said, we want to come and film that and have your closet. If we don't have you physically there, we want your closet. And I was like, okay. Then there was a major snowstorm. They couldn't come. I was living on the East Coast at the time. And so they said, could you film it? I'm like, oh, okay. So we got my big camera, right? My son, my 11-year-old son at the time, I'm like, will you film me in my closet? So he did. And I'm in my closet and I'm saying, this is where I have my meditation time, and he's filming me. And anyway, so we send that video to Oprah, and my video was on Oprah, my pictures, my voice, my letter, all that was physically on the Oprah show. I didn't, they had other guests that they brought on, but that was all on. And so millions of people saw my closet. And I was like,
I think I remember that. I have to say, I truly think I remember that.
No way.
I was a huge Oprah fan back when
you
she
were?
was doing, oh yeah, absolutely.
I have the VC, or what do you call it? The VHS?
Yeah, VHS. Yeah. Right. Wow.
And
now she's my neighbor. She lives right here in Maui. She's just up the hill from where I am.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So,
you came out of the closet on the Oprah
I came out of the closet. So it was shortly after that I actually ended up, we moved from the East Coast to Colorado, and my marriage started to, because I was being true to myself, and my marriage started to unravel, and it was a very, very difficult thing. It was, he wasn't well, so to speak, but so I had 5 children. My 2 oldest were in college, and my 3 younger ones were here. We all moved to Colorado together and went through a very, very traumatic divorce. And I needed my spiritual knowing, my connection to God and spirit. And I as a child, I called my, those beings of light and love, angels. Mm-hmm. I knew about angels. So when I had my daughter, and I awakened more, I was always very connected with angels, and it was a presence, mm-hmm. For me, they were just this unconditional love, pure, just pure love, more pure than any other beings I have known. I work with my own spirit guides now, and I call them, I've named my spirit guide team. I have a team, and they're my sacred heart team. And so through the divorce, it was it really I had to call out all of my helpers, all of seen and unseen. I needed it all. And that's when it really, my connection was so strengthened and so real and so powerful. And I learned the healing art of Reiki and did, emotional healing, spiritual healing, all of that for myself. And then just naturally started to share it with others. Mm-hmm. And so I had a really good foundation of connection, a good grounding in my own spiritual truth. I was living it. I was able to cultivate, and it was not easy because I had not a lot of mostly my family of origin. It can be a lonely journey, and it can also, but I feel that that's also part of it because it allows us, it insists, that we really trust ourselves and grow that trust and our connection to spirit. So, and just continuously trust that. And that makes it stronger. And what happened for me is I created, or I was able to create a container for how I always did view life. As a child, I was like I was very empathic. And then and I'd ask those big questions. And then as an adult, going through the divorce and the trauma of all that, I trusted my intuition and started to create a container for it to be for my spiritual life to be the way I lived. And receiving Reiki and then learning it helped me to strengthen my own intuitive knowing and my connection to the other side, to passed on loved ones, to energy healing. So I created a practice where I was, connecting with, helping others. Mm-hmm. And had teachers come, friends, colleagues, teachers come in and guide me through it a little bit, but always very independent and had to really trust my own knowing. And I think that's an important message, we can have teachers and guides and, but we have to trust ourselves and the more we do that, the stronger that spiritual essence of who we are becomes. So, yeah. So, I had built quite the life that supported me in who I uniquely am. Mm-hmm. And I raised my children that way. So part of the, ending of the marriages was a real freedom for my children. Mm-hmm. To be able to be themselves instead of what society or a parent, said they should be. And allowed my children to blossom into the unique individual sparks of life that they are. And so, yeah, and that was very, very important to me. So as mother, I feel like I knew I needed to do that for my children and for myself. And then I was able to also create a healing arts practice where I help others to connect with their power, their uniqueness, their beauty, their inherent worthiness, their spiritual selves, and grow that. And so when in 2017 in January, my youngest child, Brandon, who was 24 at the time. So I have 4 sons and 1 daughter, and 15 years, 15 and a half years apart. And he was, being the youngest of my children and the youngest when I went through the divorce. And we, he's a very empathic kid, very intuitive. I have some, he and I had shared, being the youngest, it was like he and I kind of got to have a different bond than the other children, because there were always so many kids. There were always, I was always busy with this kid or that kid. And when it just became him and I for a while, the others were gone, and his friends. My kids were, I was the mom who they brought all their friends, home. And I liked that, because then I could keep an eye on them all. But, so he and I had this pretty special connection. Andy went through a lot of, struggles with some, some alcohol and drug use. And, but he was always so loving, in his approach to life. And so he was doing really well, and he had gotten a job at a car dealership and was so proud of himself. He loved cars, and really nice luxury cars. And we were all of us, myself mostly, we're like, yes, Brandon, he's doing well. He's happy. He's on his path. He's enjoying life. And so what happened was, I'll tell just a specific story. So it was January 11th. So it was, and the numbers were 111. So 1/11/2017. And I've, over the years, part of what helped me connect with the other realms and the sometimes invisible realms, or the realms that we're connected to through symbols and energies that were numbers. So numerology, or numbers, the number sequences, which I look at as our symbols, that we understand. And it's another way of communicating through numbers, like through astrology symbols, or through they can be helpful, and that resonated with me. So over the years, numbers would be giving me information, and I would intuitively know. And then I started learning, just what does that mean? What do those numbers mean? What do those sequences mean? And so anyway, it was 111, and a friend of mine happened to pass on to me an angelic meditation for 111. And I thought, okay, I'll do it. So it was a Tuesday, and I did my meditation, and it was really beautiful, but it was different. It was what I had a vision in that meditation, where I was going through a portal, it was a pathway, and there was columns of light, like 3 columns. And I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to go through this. And it was an angelic meditation, breath meditation. So it was with Archangel Michael. And I think it was Archangel Raphael, but Michael was the one. To me, Archangel Michael is power and strength, and that unconditional love, protective energy, very strong. And so I'm in this meditation. I'm like, no, I don't want to go in there in the light. What are you talking about? And it was like, no, you need to go. And this was all, a knowing in the meditation. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go into this portal, and it was tight. It was like I had to go through this light. It would be okay, but it felt tight, like I had to just look forward and go. And I could feel that strong Archangel Michael just kind of going, pushing me, go through this portal. And I was like, what kind of a meditation is this? It was feeling kind of hard, but I did it. And I was like, wow, that was intense. And so I was it put me into this kind of meditative state for that day and the next. And I can do that because of my work, where I connect with, I hold space and connect people with their guidance and the divine flow of love. But it was a little different. This was like preparing me, and I could feel it, and I knew something was going to be happening. And then actually on the 12th, I held a moon ceremony. It was a full moon. And that's one of the things that I do for in my practice. And we had a small group of women in a moon ceremony. And then I still felt like something is going to happen. And, but I felt very much in that. I almost felt like I was in that light, in that portal, in those columns. And so the next day was Friday, January 13th. And I was in a session that evening with actually a couple, a man and a woman. And the man, I had helped him in the past connect with, and I can share this because he's given me permission, but I helped him connect with his father who had passed. And he was, my client didn't know who his father was, where his father was, but he had found out that he was adopted and that he needed my help. And this was one of the first times I did something where I did this, mediumship work that was so profound. In the past, I would connect with people's in sessions when I do my intuitive counseling. I would connect with people's passed on loved ones. They would just I would feel their energy, and if it was appropriate, and people had come to me to help do that, but it was something that I didn't really want to do because I felt I didn't feel, I don't know, I just knew there was something very sacred about connecting with people's passed on loved ones, and that I wasn't quite ready to be doing that full time, I guess, or I wasn't quite ready for it. But with this gentleman, it was such a profound experience that what had happened, how his father came into the session in the past. This was probably 2 years before this Friday, and so it changed his life, and it was miraculous. So he found this whole lost family that he never knew he had through our work together. And it just made all the difference. And he found out his roots, that he was Native Indigenous, Native American. He never knew that. And so he found his roots, his family, and through our work. So in this session,
just to clarify, sorry. Yeah. So this was 2 years prior to your son's passing?
Yeah. So yes.
So how does this tie in then?
He
just
was
trying to bring it around.
So this client was with me. I was in session with him.
Oh, okay.
A very special client who I had previously 2 years before.
Oh, okay.
Connected him with his family.
Birth family, right.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Through our work with, the other side. And so in this session that evening, which I didn't know it at the time, but that was the exact time my son was transitioning, was passing. I was in session with this client, and I saw a vision of a goddess, a big mother goddess sitting in the sky, and the stars. It was a dark night sky, and she was taking the stars from the sky and putting them on the earth, and then picking them up off the earth and putting them back into the heavens. And it put me into, I was even deeper into a type of a meditative state. So the clients leave that evening. I went to sleep and woke up the next morning to frantic, phone calls that had been happening all night, but I was in the meditative state and sleeping, and so to find out that my son was missing. So the way that the next part of what happened with the 111 portal was, we started looking for him and going on Facebook and seeing, was he posting? What's he doing? And there was a video on Facebook of him. He had posted a video that evening, around the time when I was in the session and was seeing the vision. And it was him driving he had taken a Maserati, which was the car from his dealership, out for a test drive, and was speeding down a side road where they would take the cars out, and it was a quiet road near the dealership. And he was videotaping himself, or the speedometer, which was something he would, it's kind of like, yeah, he would do that. He was quite adventurous. So and the speedometer, it just showed the speedometer. It was quiet. There was no audio. And it showed his hand holding up the phone, and the speedometer going, was numeric, going all the way up to 111 and stopped. And so when I saw that, I knew.
The video stopped, you mean, right?
The video stopped. Yeah. So it was like it's now forever on, if you Google his name, and it'll show up on, the internet, but, it was on it went up to one. Yeah. It just showed the speedometer going like 2, 4, 5, 50, 60, 70, 111, boom, done.
Wow.
Dark.
Fade to black, right?
Fade to black, yeah. And so I knew, I heard, I could feel him, I could hear him, my son, say, "I went through the portal, Mom.
Wow.
I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm in the love." And I knew, I didn't want to know, but I knew. So what happens, what happened for me was, I believe, with learning about death and our human experience with death, and we have a very human experience with it. And then we can have a very spiritual experience also. Right. And in the human experience, I had to tend to the fact that my son was missing at that moment. I had to find him. And the spiritual experience of that I knew he was gone. I knew he had died. I knew he was with the light, in the light. And he was still with me. I could feel him. So, so we did. It was not a good day. It was, the details are, it took us, I say, because then all of my children, my 4 children, his father, his girlfriend, his fiance, we were all frantically and trying to go, what happened to him? He disappeared. He was supposed to go out with his girlfriend that evening, Friday, call her after work. No one had heard from him from around 7:30 when that video was posted, the 111 car video. And so the dealership hadn't heard from him, and he hadn't returned the car. But sometimes they'll do that. They'll take the cars home, and they're not, and return them in the morning. Anyway, he was found that morning by a jogger, and what had happened is his car went off the road and landed in a retention pond, and you couldn't see it from the road, because his coworkers did go up and down the road and they looked for him and no one could find him. So I want to share the mystical experience. I think that's an important piece. So I'll try and focus on that. It's like I said, there's the mystical, forever change my life and my children's, because they're part of this too. They believe this, they view life the way that I do. And then there's the tragic, loss of a child. So the mystical experience continued, of course, and was holding me. I felt, his energy, his love. And the time went by a little bit, and I thought it was a week later or 2 weeks later, but it wasn't. It's actually 1 month to the day of his celebration of life, which was January 22nd is when we had a celebration of life. And 1 month later, I was out walking, and there were some troubling things that I needed to know. Like, I needed to know as a mother, was he sick? What did he suffer? What happened? Like, what the heck happened? How did this happen? And so I was out walking, and I walk as part of my healing and part of my, well-being. And I was asking him, and I said, Brandon, what happened when you passed? What exactly happened? And I heard him as clear as, like he was walking beside me. He goes, do you want to know, Mom? I'll tell you. And I said, yes, but don't tell me anything I don't want to hear. And, and it's like that. I do feel very, very, very protected, by the way. Everything that I didn't need to know, I didn't know. I felt very guarded by everything that I learned or went through. But so anyway, I said, wait, don't tell me now. I'm on my walk. I'm going to go home, and you can tell me when I get home, and I can write it. So we did. I went home, and I sat, and I said, okay, let me know what happened. And so here, I'm going to read what he wrote, because this is the part where it was a shared death experience. It was, oh my goodness, I was there with him.
Wow.
And I shared the part about being in session. And when I'm in session, I'm completely connected to source and a channel and in that energy. And then what I saw in session, and then the next few days. And so I started to understand that I was with him, and that I helped him from that meditation, actually, on 111. I was preparing, I was helping him, I was guiding him as I ushered him into life. He came through my body. I gave birth to him. I raised him, and I ushered him out into the realm of spirit. And this piece here, what he shared with me, it kind of tied it all in. And when he was speaking this, and when I heard it, I could feel myself there. That experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here's what I wrote, what he told me, and what I did write. He said, so here's how it went. I was driving. This is my son speaking. I was driving, and along came this giant angel, and she snatched me right out of that car. She lifted me up, and she held me in her arms. And I thought it was you, Mom. I thought it was you. She looked and smelled like you. She felt like you. And it was like I was going home. And she held me, and we watched the car just for a moment. And she took me somewhere. And she held me and told me how much she loved me. I still thought it was you, Mom. I think it was you. I felt the connection, like when you love me, that love goes on and on and on. she was your love and my love and all the love that I ever felt and all the love I ever gave. I felt this warm glow, and it's like that's where I've been returning to over and over and over again. I remove myself from it and I visit places and then I return, but I can't really ever leave it, ever. It was all a part of the plan to light up this love again in our family, to make love the strongest. And he said, it's more like remembrance. We forgot, but you didn't forget, Mom. You never forgot love. You fed me love, Mom. So much love. Thank you. And I said, thank you, Brandon. And now, and he said, now I want you to be fed the love over and over and over. And he said, your angel's telling me to tell you that, Mom. So
wow, that just, it brings me to tears. I mean, what a beautiful connection to have. Yeah. And to hear those words and to know, I mean, I can just feel the truth of it, you know, as you read them. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, you're welcome. Yeah. Thank you, Lisa, for, you know, providing the space to speak these stories of they're hard to speak, you know, because, right. Well, two reasons, right? Well, because they're so, you know, the truth is my son is, you know, his body is not here anymore, but it's hard to speak it too, because it's so, you can't put words to it, the right. Experience. But that's why I listened to what he was saying and I could feel it. And I right. could know that what he said about coming home right. was both my home as mother was always where my kids, he would come home mm-hmm. and he'd feel safe here no matter what was, and he had some pretty intense things happening in his life over the last, you know, the years prior to his passing, but he would always come home and be here. And that was my mission, was to have the home where he and his siblings and others could come and feel and know love. Right. And to know that's what he experienced when he mm-hmm. left his body. Mm-hmm. And the truth of it, you know, it was like, oh, okay. Thank you for right. letting me know that, Brandon. And now and then it just all started to connect, you know, with, mm-hmm. oh my goodness, I was with him. Right. And the, you know, I also, through my practices, my work, I do shamanic practice or some shamanic practitioner work. And so I knew there was a name for what I had done, mm-hmm. you know, that I was ushering him. What an honor. Right. Right. What an honor. It just, and the connection, the deep, deep connections that I have with him, and he's still here, you know, he's still doing his work. And that's what I learned too, you know, about when we leave this plane, some of us, I believe some of us, our soul mission is to stay or to have part of us stay, you know, part of our mm-hmm. energies, stay and help those that we've left. And that not everybody's, I don't believe right. that everyone's, mm-hmm. You know, some of us are, when we're done on this plane, we go do other things and go. But I know with my son, with Brandon, because of some of the experiences that have happened since his passing, that he's here and he's become a very powerful angel, if you will, on earth, you know, and well, as I recall in your email, I think you said he was pushing you to contact me, right? When you sent yes. the email to me. Yes. And you know what, you want to hear something? So I went yesterday and I went on Facebook to connect with your Facebook. Do you know how many likes you had? No, how many? One. Yeah.
I happened to notice that
Did
this
you
morning,
notice that?
and I thought, wow, that's like so cool. I want to take a screenshot of
I
that
took
or
a
something.
screenshot of it. I can send
Oh,
it to you. I
fabulous.
was like,
Oh
so
my
I
God.
went there and there was 1,100 and
And 11.
10. No, there was
Oh,
one.
10. You
And
were
then
the,
I liked you. And then isn't that funny? I was like, seriously, you can't make this up. So my kids
oh
and I
my
have
gosh.
jokes about that, you know, like when Brandon shows up and he's very, very loud in, you know, his spirit is very present and loud. And
Right.
he has helped, he's like a helper, you know, I feel like he was a strong young man. He was fit and was into, part of his work was also physical fitness. And he had he started a nutrition company with my other son. And they actually only got to the part where they were making apparel, t-shirts with his logos and things. But yeah, so here, I'm going to show you this. This is Brandon.
Oh, beautiful.
So he's a strong, very, yeah, he pushes with love.
Right.
And
For our listeners, can you describe the picture? He's running down a railroad track.
Yeah. Okay. So he had his own near-death experience about 1.5 years before he actually did pass, and he came back from it. And this was, this picture is my son framed this for us this last Christmas. Each one of us got a picture of Brandon walking down a railroad track. It's his back, and he lifted above his head is a tree trunk. So
Giant tree trunk.
Giant tree trunk. So this is yeah, he was a bodybuilder.
Wow.
And I didn't know this about this picture, but this was at my son Alex's house. Behind his house was the railroad tracks, and Brandon went out there. And this was when Brandon was healing from a near-death experience. And he said, I'm going to beat this. I'm going to get better. I'm going to get strong and healthy. And him and his friend they figured out how to put this tree trunk above his head, and he walked down the railroad track. And
wow.
friend snapped a picture of him. And yeah, so I had that on my shelf, and this past January, when it was the 2-year anniversary of his passing, the way that the picture was, and I did take a picture of this, and on the shelf, the light was shining in on it, and he had angel wings of light.
Wow.
Yeah. On that picture.
Of course he did.
Yeah.
Of course he did.
So that's,
well, I love what you said about the human experience versus the spiritual experience of death, because I think that's the crux of what everybody struggles with. Or I don't want to say everybody, a lot of people struggle with, because it's the inherent loss of a physical being is palpable, and it's horrible, and it's so difficult. And that's the part our society has completely, that's what they talk about. That's what they portray death as. And so then, as in a societal consciousness level, we all get stuck. I think many of us get stuck in that 3D world of death, and it's the end, and they're gone, and there's no connection. However, that's the point of my show, Exploring Death, is the spiritual experience of it. And I mean, what a brilliant example of that experience of you seeing the angel, having that shared death experience of actually seeing the angel picking up Brandon, your star, on the earth and placing him up in the heavens. I mean, it just, and then you reading that story from him, which was on 2/22, if I got all the all of the numbers correct.
Yeah, I know.
Date that my husband died, February 22nd.
Oh my gosh.
And 44, he was 44 years old. So 2 times 22 is 44. It was the year 2004. And just yesterday I was at the grocery store checking out, and the total was $44.40. I mean, I see it everywhere, just like I'm sure you see your numbers, and it's so confirming, and it completely helps me navigate this physical 3D life when I know that I'm getting messages from the other side. And that's what saves me, because I think truly, if we didn't have these little nuggets of, connection, I can understand why people get so depressed and so down when they lose a loved one. But that's the whole idea of when you open up, you can truly save yourself and know that they're still there.
Yes. Yes. I want to read this to you. This is very helpful. I don't know where I read this or if I wrote it. I can't remember. I don't think it says, I have grief and sadness, pain and despair that Brandon's physical life has ended. And I have great joy in connecting with his fully realized spiritual self.
Whew, that says it all. And it's so true.
It is. And I do want to say that, it's through those experiences that I had of this fully realized spiritual self, I question it because our society is like, well, you have to, it's so focus on the grief and the death
right.
and the, oh my God.
Right. The separation. The loss.
And it's like, yeah, that's true. But, when I would question like, but wait a minute, I had these experiences and I remember continuously saying, I'm going to believe in those. I'm going to believe because I couldn't not. I mean, I had so many of them and continue to, that his presence. So I keep following those experiences, as I said at the beginning, the synchronicities of the 111s, the feathers, the white feathers that drop from the sky, and the ways that he is present. It's like, I want to believe in that, and that will, and so it's like, I choose to go there. And no one's going to tell me different, it's like
that's
that.
Right. Well, and it is, and it's a choice. And I believe that's where, because again, you can choose to be in grief for the rest of your life, or you can choose to believe in the miracle that they're right here with us, and then start seeing the synchronicities and the signs. And it brings me joy. I'm sure it brings you joy, Well, let me pull some cards on this. Or did you want to say
yes. Well, I do want to say that too, that I'm on a mission, and I'm still in my, process. Oh, I want to say this too. It was 111 days from Brandon's birthday, which is September 25th, to the day he passed. 111.
Goodness.
And I figured that out on his birthday of when I was laying on a massage table crying my eyes out that he was gone after the first year of his when he was gone. And I kept hearing him, Mom, you got to do he was always into fitness, fitness challenge. And I heard soul challenge. There's a soul challenge. And I'm like, okay, it's 100-day challenge. And then I realized it's 111 days between September 25th and the day of his passing. And so I'm challenging myself to shift, to be a part of the change in how we view death. And that death is not a disease. It is a transition. It is a portal into the next part of your life. And I want to be, so I do that, but I want to be a part of that, I
love that. Yes. And when I got your email, that was one of the things you said. And I'm like, yes, another fellow, person shining light on death. And that's what we need, is just more light beings that are here on this earth that are holding our torches so that others can find their way home,
Yes.
and not be lost in this 3D, Downerville that we live in.
Right? I know. It can get really heavy.
Well, let's pull some cards on that. Let's ask about, the whole idea of shining light on death. How about that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Because to me, and some days I wonder, why am I doing this? I mean, but it just keeps pulling me back. So I truly believe that's my mission on earth. So I'm so glad to have another fellow being here that's,
well, we need each other,
For sure.
I have a Hawaiian connection through Brandon too.
Oh, great.
So I'm not surprised that
Well, fabulous. Well, you'll have to come on out and you can
Oh,
get my IANS event. All right. So the first card, which is always the blockage card, is fulfillment. And I totally understand why this is the blockage card, because we all feel, when we lose someone, it's like you're just lost. You're not fulfilled. You're like, death is nothing. Our society has created this idea that death is the end. And some people believe even that when you die, that's it. You go into the ground and you cease to exist, which just makes my heart cry, because that, to my experience and yours, I mean, we've seen them go on and then we felt their presence. We hear them. There's just things that we cannot explain that wouldn't be happening if they weren't on the other side. So, so our action card is the first one is pleasure. And to find the pleasure in death, which sounds crazy, is, with our societal views, it's like there is no pleasure in death, but there is when you open your mind and you open, especially your heart, to the experience of death, and to know that it's, like you said, it's not an end, it's a transition. And and I always equate it to the water, right? We can boil water and it turns into steam. Well, that's what our bodies do. We go into the ethers, into another dimension, but we're still here and they're still here. And then the outcome is focus. And that's, I think, part of it too, is that you really do, if you want to connect, you need to have a focused, attentioned mind on it. You can't just kind of like let everything go. And I mean, they'll still try as hard as they can, but if you're focused, or I guess actually being the outcome card, my guys are saying, no, they're going to come to you in a focused way, but you need to be open to receive it.
Absolutely. Yes. And also our work, I think, as humans, is to clear away the untruths, right, that which doesn't feel right to us. And, the fulfillment that was I want to say that about what I had to do for Brandon and for myself was it was like that, wait a minute, no one's going to tell me that my son's gone now and his life is done and over, and isn't that tragic and sad? He only lived 24 years. It's like, wait a minute, I know that life lives on. There's a continuation. And so the fulfillment of that promise, like the promise that each one of us have sacred lives, we're lights, we're light beings. We have something we're offering here on this planet at this time. And what was it for my son? So since his body's not here, I was like, it's my job to make sure everybody knows, and that I knew, and that he lived a fulfilling life, and that I can live a fulfilling life, even with a child who's passed, which
that's right. That's beautiful. I love that interpretation of the fulfillment, because that's it. Society would say, oh, how tragic. He didn't live a full life. He lived an extraordinary full life. And not only that, but he's living on through you. And, that's talking about fulfilling.
Yes. And so pleasure is pretty funny, because I also, that is so important. I think that it helps us to connect with our loved ones in spirit, connect with the helpers that are not in body, is to find pleasure and joy. Because they're actually, the messages I get from my son is he is having the time of his life.
Absolutely.
Of his other life, of his life on the other side. He's having so much fun. And when I get too serious, at the service and I ran the service, I had to be the one to stand up there and guide it. And I did. And there were like 500 people that came, and stories of Brandon and how he made all this difference in people's lives. And I was like, I didn't even know that about my kid. But to have that fulfilling moment. And then there was pictures running of him continuously, of his what do you call it, an audio, a video show. So we're up there and we're in the, it was like pretty heavy, right? I'm standing up there, my son just passed, all these people gathered for a celebration of life. I'm like, oh my God. And there's this picture of him wearing a clown nose that kept playing. I was like, every time I'd look up, there would be him on the screen when he'd be like, with a big clown nose on. And I thought, that's it.
Right.
open our hearts, and our hearts soften, and we can connect to our loved ones, and we can connect to how they're still with us, and the love that's here from people who are still in body.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely. Like you said, it's about that pleasure and being, by opening your heart, and instead of in grief where it's constricted and shut down, if you can open in pleasure and reflect on like what an amazing life he had, and look at how many people showed up at his service, and what a gift was to this world, as opposed to looking at like, oh, it was cut off and it was too short and it didn't. It's like, no, it is what it was. You can't change it. So embrace.
You can't. And there's tragedy in this life.
Oh, absolutely.
And what I will tell people, and you go through the grief, and it's like that portal. It was the portal. It's like,
that you didn't want to go through.
Right. You go through it. And I saw this too. It was like, and then there's this oasis almost in it. When you got to feel it. You've got to feel the loss.
Right.
But keep going, and know that with the loss is the deep, connection you have with them. And it's like, wow, it's both. It's both.
Right.
It's
It
both,
is both
grief and joy, connection and feeling, disconnect. It's like, it's both. Right. It's there.
That's amazing. Yeah. I love it. Oh my gosh, Mary, you and I could talk all day.
I know we could. I know. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. And I'm going to have all your links on the website. Is there anything, why don't you just mention for our listeners how they can get in touch with you?
Sure. Okay. So the links will be there. I have a website. It's my name, MaryDagostino.com is my website. And I'm, working with clients to assist them in connecting with their loved ones, and also, healing from loss. So doing both, it's like a new grief type of grief counseling. I do have grief counseling. I found a beautiful, wonderful grief counselor, but, it's like, I'm here for you, and I want to, help you connect and also open to your own light and how you can live it. And so, you can find me there and on the links, and we're going to change the way we view death.
That's right. And I'm so glad to have a fellow, person that's going to help lead the charge, because we need everybody we can to start waking up to this new paradigm of death.
Yes. Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you, Mary. All right. Okay. And thank you to all the listeners today. Thank you for listening to the Exploring Death podcast. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Before you make any financial or legal decisions, consult a professional. This show is copyrighted by Exploring Death. Written permission must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting.